Strap in, my loves, because today we're doing story time with a purpose. This might get a little personal. I've been meaning to make a video like this for some time. We're getting around the beginning of when I started my TikTok channel, my YouTube channel, that kind of thing, last year in 2025. So I wanted to talk about why I do this. And I got some bad news today. I'm not having a great day. So I wanted to talk about hope, about some similar themes, but I was not in a very good place when Donald Trump was elected last year. And when I heard the news that he was elected, it hit me in the stomach like somebody had punched me in the gut. I had known for some time that if he got back into office, things would be really bad. I did not realize how bad or how quickly. You know the potential is there, but you don't necessarily want to believe it'll happen. But then as we got into the next year and he got into office, things started getting scary. And I know you guys know what I mean. Things got scary immediately. He started pumping out executive orders and firing generals and inspectors general and all kinds of people. And none of us in our lifetimes had ever seen such a dramatic mangling of the American system. I mean, the judicial and legislative bowing to the whims of the president, Congress bowing to the whims of the president breaking all norms of decency and civility in our government and our society. We truly have lived in unprecedented times, but on a personal level, I started watching all of the news and the YouTube channels and daily because there was just so much information to absorb. And then I started seeing about the plans for the protests. And a lot of you may have heard me mention I work full-time outside of this. So the first protest I could go to, I believe, was the first No Kings protest. And I've never been to a protest in my life before that. And I will tell you the God's honest truth. I was listening to the news and listening to the news and listening to the news for days before that. And I will tell you that on the day of the protest and the day before the protest, I was scared. I studied history in college. I've read about history my whole life. I know what it means when a fascist regime comes up and you speak out against them. I know what the consequences can be. And yes, I was scared to go to the protest. But I really searched inside of myself and I thought about it. Back when I was in college, when I was young, when I was in my teens and 20s, and I first really started learning about the history of fascism and authoritarianism, in depth, not just what you're taught when you're young. There was a part of my brain that sincerely was bothered by the question, if this ever happens in America in my lifetime, will I have the courage to stand up, to fight, to speak? Or will I be quiet? Will I be a coward and save myself? And I will not lie to you that I have teetered on the knife's edge of that. But that day that I went to the protest, I made my decision. Because I realized that I could not live with myself, even if I survived whatever was to come. I could not live with myself knowing that I was a coward and I did not have the courage and the strength to speak out when I knew that I needed to, when I knew it was the right thing to do, when I knew that the stakes are so high. I felt in that moment that if I did not speak, if I did not act, that it could destroy me. The shame, the guilt, the feeling that I'm not who I want to be. None of us are who we ideally want to be. We all fall short. But we strive and we continue to fight. And that's what makes our lives worthwhile. Then I went to the protest. And I have rarely experienced such a moment of beauty in my life. And I mean that on a deep level. I'm someone who comes from both a childhood and an adulthood in which I have experienced deep and profound trauma. I'm someone who, for many years as an adult and somewhat as a teenager, had shut my emotions off due to the inability to deal with them, essentially. I shut down large parts of my personality and myself just to survive. And reclaiming my emotions was something that I had tried to already start doing before this point. It was a journey that I was already on. But I was not prepared for the intensity of the emotions that I felt that day because I went with one friend and he knew a couple of people who were going to be there. But honestly, it being Oklahoma, I didn't expect a lot of people. So, there were a few of us standing out on the curb by a busy street. And then I was like, okay, well, that's cool. At least we got a few people. That's better than nothing. And then after we'd been there for a little bit, I looked behind me to where there's this shared parking lot behind with all of these businesses in it. And there was you could just see here and here and here and here and here these people, these cars streaming in, and people getting out of them with signs and banners and all kinds of things. And I cannot tell you, especially for someone who had to shut down their emotions to survive for so long, how overwhelming it was in that moment. I almost burst into tears in public, which is not something that I like to do. And these people just kept streaming up, and they were so friendly and upbeat and energetic and loving and just, and I'm an introverted person. I'm what do you call it? ADHD. I have autism and ADHD. I don't, my capacity for socialization is intense but limited. But as I watch these people stream in, and as I watch the heavy traffic drift by, and people waving and honking and cheering us from the roads, I had honestly never experienced anything like that in my life. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that I had a feeling of just throat tightening joy and wanting to cry in that moment, because it had been so many years since I felt any shred of hope for humanity, since I felt anything, except for rare occasions. But for the most part of the last, 10 years before that, except for rare occasions, I had hardly ever felt anything near that sense of hope, joy, connection with other people, and what I can only describe as an overwhelming pride in humanity, which that in itself is something that I'm not sure I'd ever felt before in my life. And that's why I started this channel. Sorry, I'm rambling at this point, but this is what I wanted to say. I didn't start this channel because I believe I have some special skill or talent that can save us, okay? I started this channel because I became inspired by you guys that I saw online, by you guys that I saw at the protests, by everyone that I see fighting against this evil of fascism and hatred in our society. I became inspired